I stand accused alone, and nobody will believe me." The words tore out of Sofia Vasquez before she could stop them. The Los Angeles County Courthouse courtroom smelled of old wood polish and fear, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead on a freezing January morning at 9:47 a.m. Sofia stood at the defendant's table in her only clean blouse, wrinkled cotton, 3 years old, collar fraying at the edges, her hand shaking as she clutched a public defender's business card he had given her 30 seconds before abandoning her case. Across the aisle sat Preston Mercer in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her salary, his wife Catherine beside him in white Chanel, both smirking as the bailiff read the charges. Child endangerment. Fraud. Negligence resulting in serious bodily injury. The gallery held 50 spectators, phones raised, ready to record her destruction. Judge Morrison's gavel hovered above the bench. But in the back row, a man in a charcoal suit with silver cufflinks sat perfectly still, watching every detail of her trembling chin, her refusal to cry, the way she stood straighter when Preston whispered trash loud enough for the courtroom to hear it echo like a blade through silence. Nico Conti had entered through the public entrance for the first time in 16 years. His Lieutenant Rocco stood outside with 12 men in black, waiting for a single text message. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 3 months earlier, to the morning everything changed forever. 3 months before the courthouse. Sofia Vasquez woke at 5:23 a.m. in her converted closet in the Brentwood mansion, and the first thing she did was count her money. $34. She could feel each bill in her worn wallet like a countdown to nothing. The closet had no window, just a single bulb hanging from the ceiling and a twin mattress on a metal frame, a suitcase in the corner containing every piece of clothing she owned. She was 28 years old and looked closer to 40. Her dark hair, once thick, now hung in a thin ponytail. Her brown eyes had lost their shine somewhere between the bus ride from Nevada and the first month of 14-hour workdays. Her hands bore calluses and small burn marks from the mansion kitchen, her nails broken short from changing diapers and scrubbing floors. She pulled on her uniform, black pants, white shirt, and stepped into the hallway. The mansion belonged to the Conti family, though not to the Conti she would come to know. This was their legitimate side, their architect holdings and real estate portfolio. The nanny position paid $800 monthly, deposited directly into an account that always seemed empty before the next deposit arrived. Sofia had been hired 6 weeks ago by a woman named Lucia who handled household staff. No background check. No references called. Just a single interview in the kitchen while Lucia sipped coffee and never made eye contact. Sofia climbed the back staircase to the 3rd floor where Ava Conti lived. The child was 7 years old, pale as moonlight, with blonde hair and her mother's blue eyes. She had been born with a congenital heart condition, a hole between the chambers that made her tired, made her blue-lipped in winter, made her collapse on playgrounds without warning. Sofia found her awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at her small hands like they belonged to someone else. "Good morning, Mija," Sofia said. "How does your heart feel today?" Ava looked up. "Like it is working too hard." Sofia sat on the edge of the mattress and took the child's small wrist, feeling the rapid flutter of her pulse. The beat was irregular, skipping, frantic. She pressed her palm against Ava's chest and felt it there too, a bird trapped inside a cage made of ribs. "We will go slow today," Sofia said. "We will stay inside where it is warm." "I do not want to stay inside." Ava's voice was small but certain. "Everyone leaves when I stay inside. I want to go outside." Sofia had no answer for this. By 9 a.m., Sofia was downstairs in the mansion kitchen when her phone buzzed. It was a text from her ex-boyfriend Preston Mercer. She had not heard from him in 2 weeks, not since he had followed her to the grocery store and told her she could never escape him, that Los Angeles was small even though it was not, that he would find her wherever she tried to hide. The text said, "I am in the city. We need to talk." Sofia deleted it without responding and placed her phone face down on the counter. Her hands trembled as she began preparing Ava's lunch, a sandwich cut into small pieces, fruit that was soft enough not to require chewing, water with electrolytes to help her weak heart pump. Preston had been abusive in Nevada, but not in the way people talked about abuse. He had never hit her, not exactly. He had controlled her bank account, isolated her from friends, told her repeatedly that she was worthless, that she should be grateful he tolerated her, that she would never survive without him. When she saved enough money working double shifts at a casino diner, she had bought a bus ticket to Los Angeles and not told him goodbye. That was 3 months ago. Now he was here. Lucia found her in the kitchen at noon. Lucia Conti was 55 years old, beautiful in the way wealthy women became beautiful through maintenance and surgery, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her clothes impeccable. She looked at Sofia the way someone looks at furniture. "There is an incident," Lucia said. Her voice was flat. "The playground on Wilshire Boulevard. Ava collapsed. You carried her to the hospital." Sofia's stomach dropped. "Yes. She was not breathing. I did CPR and—" "You took her without permission," Lucia interrupted. "You had no right to take her without calling me first." "She was not breathing," Sofia repeated. "She was unconscious. The hospital said her valve." "You will no longer be needed," Lucia said. She placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. "Your final paycheck. You will leave by 6 p.m. Sofia stared at the envelope. "But I did not do anything wrong. I saved her life. You took my daughter without authorization. You made medical decisions that were not yours to make." Lucia turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Pack your things. Security will escort you out." The door closed. Sofia opened the envelope. $640. Not $800. Lucia had deducted her final week's pay for the hospital trip, as if saving a drowning child was grounds for wage theft. She had $34 before this. Now she had $674 to last until what? She did not have an apartment. She had a motel room she paid weekly, owned nothing, was nothing. She went upstairs to pack. Ava was sleeping, her small body sprawled across the bed, her breathing shallow and rapid. Sofia watched her for 5 minutes, memorizing the exact shade of her blonde hair, the way her eyelashes rested on her cheeks, the small scar on her collarbone from the emergency surgery they had mentioned at the hospital. She touched the child's forehead, and Ava stirred. "Do I have to stay inside?" Ava whispered. "Not anymore," Sofia said. "But that is not sad. Sometimes leaving is the only brave thing we can do." She packed her suitcase. 3 changes of clothes. A book with water-damaged pages. A prayer card her mother had given her before she died. She left the room at 5:50 p.m., and security was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. The motel room was on a street where the neon signs flickered and died and flickered again, where the ice machine ran 20 hours a day, where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing in Spanish and English and languages she did not recognize. She sat on the bed and looked at the debt collector's letter from the previous month. Final notice stamped in red ink across the top. It was for a medical bill from Nevada, something her ex-boyfriend had put in her name. $32,000. The letter said she had 10 days to pay or they would begin garnishment proceedings. She had $674. There was a knock on her door at 11 p.m. Sofia's body went rigid. She knew that knock. She had heard it through the walls of 3 different Nevada apartments. She did not open the door. "Sofia, I know you are in there." Preston's voice was smooth, calm, the voice he used when he was being dangerous. "We need to talk about what you owe me." She pressed her back against the wall and said nothing. "I paid for everything in Nevada," he continued. "Your food. Your apartment. Your bus ticket when you left. You owe me thousands of dollars, and you will not run from me again." Footsteps. He was pacing the hallway outside her room. "The hospital called me," he said. They wanted to know who authorized the emergency surgery. I told them it was unauthorized. I told them I never gave permission. They are investigating you now, Sofia. By morning, they will have filed charges. You will be arrested unless you come with me. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not make a fist. By tomorrow, Preston said, nobody will believe a single word you say. Nobody will help you. You will be completely alone. And when you are alone, you will have no choice but to come back to me. His footsteps faded. The door to another room opened and closed. Sofia sat on the floor of her motel room for 3 hours without moving, without sleeping, without crying. The tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus months ago. At 2:47 a.m., a red and blue light began rotating across her walls. Police sirens. The courtroom was waiting 3 months later, and she stood in it alone, and nobody in the gallery believed her, and the judge was about to strike his gavel, and in the back row a man in a charcoal suit with silver cufflinks texted a single message to Rocco, who waited in a black SUV outside. The text said, "Do it now. Drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow." The alarm on Sofia Vasquez's phone screamed at 6:15 in the morning, and she did not move. She lay in the converted closet that served as her bedroom in the Brentwood mansion, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere she would never go. 7 feet by 4 feet. No window. A cot with a blanket so thin you could see through it to the bare mattress underneath. Her entire wardrobe folded into a plastic storage bin that sat in the corner like a small coffin. She worked as a live-in nanny for $800 a month, and every single cent of it went somewhere that was not here. Sofia pressed her feet onto the cold floor and stood. Her body ached in ways that did not have names. The muscles in her legs were tight from standing all day. Her lower back throbbed from lifting a 7-year-old child in and out of bed throughout the night. Her hands were calloused from scrubbing, washing, carrying, holding. She was 28 years old and her body felt like it belonged to someone twice that age. She dressed in the dark because turning on the light would take electricity she was not supposed to use. The Contis did not want her using their electricity for anything beyond the bare minimum. She pulled on the maid's uniform, black pants, white shirt, black apron, and tied her long dark hair back in a braid so tight it pulled at her temples. When she looked in the mirror, a ghost looked back. Someone hollow. Someone used up. The kitchen in the mansion was the size of her entire apartment back in Houston had been. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under track lighting. The marble countertop stretched 15 feet, pristine and cold like a surface in a morgue. Sofia moved through it like she was walking through someone else's dream. She had to prepare Ava's breakfast before the girl woke up. Low sodium. No sugar. No foods that would tax the heart. The doctor had given her a list written in clinical language that translated to this: nothing that tastes good. Sofia prepared oatmeal with unsweetened applesauce and a single glass of water. She arranged it on a child's plate decorated with cartoon animals, trying to make it beautiful, trying to make it something a 7-year-old might actually want to eat. Ava's bedroom was on the 2nd floor. It was 3 times the size of Sofia's closet. The walls were painted pale blue like the sky. A canopy bed with white lace hung above the mattress like a cloud. Stuffed animals lined the shelves, and posters of animated characters smiled down from the walls. But none of it could hide what was happening inside the girl's chest. Sofia opened the door quietly. Ava was already awake, sitting up in bed with her knees pulled to her chest, her small hand pressed against her ribs. Her lips had a faint blue tinge to them, almost the color of bruises. The color that meant her heart was struggling again. "Good morning, M.I. Corazon," Sofia said. Her voice was soft, the way you speak to something fragile. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Ava whispered. "I don't feel good." Sofia sat on the edge of the mattress and reached for the girl's wrist. She found the pulse, thin and fluttering like a bird trapped in a cage, racing and then slowing, racing and then slowing. Irregular. Wrong. The medications were supposed to keep it steady, but nothing was working anymore. The cardiologist had warned her 3 weeks ago, without intervention, her heart will deteriorate rapidly. She needs surgery within the next 2 months, or we will lose her. 2 months. That was the timeline the doctor had given, and it felt like a countdown to a bomb that nobody could defuse. Your heart is working very hard today, Sofia said, keeping her voice level even though fear was rising in her throat like floodwater. But it is strong. You are strong. Will you stay with me? Ava asked. Her small fingers gripped Sofia's hand. Even when it hurts. Always, M.I. Corazon. Always. Sofia helped her wash and dress, buttoning the purple cardigan over the girl's tiny frame. Ava's ribs showed through her clothes. She weighed only 52 pounds. Her blonde hair, inherited from her father, hung down her back in waves that Sofia had brushed that morning. She looked like a doll made of porcelain, something beautiful and breakable. The walk to school took 15 minutes. 3 blocks through the wealthy neighborhood where mansions sat behind iron gates and the air smelled like money and imported flowers. Ava's hand stayed in Sofia's throughout the journey. The girl moved slowly, taking small steps, breathing carefully through her nose like she had been taught. Other children ran past them on the sidewalk, their parents jogging alongside them, their bodies whole and strong and capable of anything. Sofia tried not to watch them. Tried not to think about what it meant that Ava would never run like that. At the school gates, Ava looked up at her. Will you be here when I get out? Yes, baby. I will be here. Promise? Promise. Sofia watched until the girl disappeared into the building, then turned back toward the mansion. The morning was already turning hot. The sun beat down on the pavement, and by the time she reached the service entrance, sweat was running down her back. The day stretched out in front of her like a trap. Laundry. Cleaning. Organizing the pantry. Preparing lunch. Picking Ava up at 3 o'clock. Preparing dinner. Sitting with the girl through the evening while she did her homework, while her breathing became labored, while her small hand sometimes pressed against her chest like she could hold her own heart together through sheer will. At 2:55, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, come to the service entrance. Sofia's entire body went cold. She had seen him only twice since leaving Houston 4 months ago. Both times had been at a distance, barely real, like ghosts that might vanish if she looked directly at them. But she had felt him everywhere. She had felt his presence like a shadow that refused to leave, like a curse that could not be erased. Preston Mercer was waiting outside the service entrance when she pushed through the door. 6'2". Jim muscled in a way that looked painful. His face was handsome in the way that dangerous things often were, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that never quite focused on what they were looking at, a jaw that clenched and released like he was always angry even when he was smiling. He was smiling now. That was the worst part. That smile had meant love once, and then it had meant something else entirely. "Hello, baby," he said. His voice was smooth, honeyed, like venom poured into sugar. "I missed you." "You need to leave," Sofia said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to be. "You have a restraining order against you." Preston laughed. Actually laughed. "Do you really think that piece of paper matters? I know the sergeant down at the precinct. We play poker on Thursdays. He told me that your filing got delayed. Indefinitely." He took a step toward her. "There is nobody protecting you here, Sofia. These rich people do not care about servants. You are invisible to them. And when you are invisible, you are mine." She could smell his cologne, expensive and choking. She could see the gold watch on his wrist, the kind of thing that cost more than she made in a year. She could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical thing, like pressure against her chest. "I will call the police," she said. "Go ahead." He stepped closer. "But you and I both know they will not come. And when they do not come, you will understand that you are completely alone. And when you are alone, you will remember that I am the only person who has ever wanted you. You will remember that, and you will come back to me." Sofia turned and walked back through the service entrance. Her legs were shaking so badly she thought they might give out. Behind her, she could hear him laughing. Not angry laughter. Confident laughter. The laughter of someone who believed he had already won. She locked the door. Then locked the kitchen door. Then locked her bedroom door, even though it was only a converted closet and a lock would not stop anyone who was truly determined. She sat on her cot and checked her bank account on her phone. The number made her stomach turn. $34.12. That was all she had in the world. Rent on the motel room was due in 5 days. Ava's medications cost $90 a month. The school tuition was $600, and even though the Contis paid it, they expected her to maintain Ava's other expenses, which meant food, transportation, emergency medications when the girl's heart flared up. There was a sound at her door. The softest knock, barely audible. Sofia's entire body went rigid. But when she opened it, it was not Preston. It was Ava, still in her school uniform, her face flushed. "I came home early," the girl said. "My heart did the funny thing and the nurse called Daddy. He sent a car to pick me up." She held out her wrist, and Sofia could see the medical alert bracelet glowing red. The red light meant emergency. It meant her heart was failing again. "Come here, M.I. Corazon," Sofia said, and she pulled the girl against her chest and held her while her small body trembled. "I have you. You are safe. I will always keep you safe." But even as she said it, she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. Not with $34 to her name. Not with a man stalking her through the service entrance. Not with a child whose heart was breaking apart from the inside, and no way to fix it. The monitors beeped in steady rhythm, each pulse a small mercy, a confirmation that Ava's heart was still fighting. Sofia sat in the plastic chair beside the child's hospital bed, her hand wrapped around those small fingers, afraid that if she let go even for a breath, the girl would slip away into whatever darkness waited on the other side of consciousness. The ICU room was all fluorescent white and the smell of antiseptic so thick it coated her throat. Outside the window, Los Angeles sprawled in December cold, indifferent to the miracle happening behind glass. The door opened. He did not knock. The man who entered was tall, 6'3", moving with a kind of deliberate control that suggested violence lived in his bones but was kept on a tight leash. Charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, the kind of garment that cost more than 3 months of Sofia's old salary. Silver threaded through his dark hair at the temples. His eyes were storm gray, penetrating, the eyes of someone accustomed to being obeyed. A thin scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade's afterthought. 2 men flanked him, shoulders broad as doorways, hands resting near jackets that definitely concealed weapons. Sofia stood. Every instinct screamed danger. "You're the one who carried her 2 miles, the man said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, words arriving without unnecessary sound. "Who are you?" Sofia's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Family. Distant family." He stepped closer to the bed, looking down at Ava with an expression Sofia couldn't name, something between hunger and loss. "I'm told you saved her life." "I did what anyone would." "No." He turned those storm gray eyes on her. "You did what almost no one would." He placed a card on the bedside table, white, expensive paper, a single phone number printed in black. Nothing else. No name. No title. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 7. It's handled." Sofia's throat closed. "I can't pay you back. I have $34 to my name. I have nothing. I'm not asking you to. Why would you help me?" The words came out cracked, desperate. "I'm nobody. I'm a nanny in a converted closet. I'm a woman with a restraining order the police won't file. Why would you?" Something raw crossed his face like a crack appearing in a stone fortress, there and gone before she could fully see it. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Because someone has to. The two men exchanged a glance, the kind of look that carried entire conversations. In 15 years of working for him, Rocco would later tell Enzo, he had never heard Nico Conti speak like that. Never seen him stand so close to anyone without a purpose beyond violence. "My name is Nico," he said. "If you need anything before tomorrow, you call that number." He left before she could respond, and the air in the room seemed to expand the moment the door closed. At 9 o'clock that same night, Sofia returned to the Brentwood mansion to gather what remained of her life. The locks had been changed. The head of household, a woman named Mrs. Chen with a face like carved ice, handed her a termination letter and an eviction notice, effective immediately. "Your services are no longer required. Please vacate the premises within 24 hours. Preston Mercer stepped from the shadows of the hallway like a creature that had been waiting all along, which perhaps he had been. He was 28, handsome in the way that monsters often are, with dark eyes that held no light at all. He smiled. "Told you I'd ruin you," he said. "Catherine made some calls. You're done. The Contis are moving your things to storage. You're out." Sofia's hands clenched. "You're insane. You have a restraining order." "Filed where? With whom?" He stepped closer. "I know every cop in this city. I bought 3 of them. Your little piece of paper is worth less than toilet paper." She turned to run. He grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to cut off blood flow, and pulled her back. His breath smelled like whiskey and menace. "Come back to me," he said into her ear. "Apologize. Tell me you were wrong to leave. Do that, and maybe I make all this go away." Sofia yanked her hand free hard enough to feel something tear in her shoulder, and she ran. Down the service stairs. Through the kitchen. Out into the December night where the cold bit at her exposed skin like broken glass. She had nowhere to go. Not really. The motel on Sunset Boulevard accepted walk-ins at $40 a night, which left her with -$6 if she paid for a room. But the manager, an old man who'd seen enough suffering in his life to recognize it on sight, gave her a room anyway and told her to settle up when she could. She sat on the stained mattress at midnight, the walls thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television bleeding through the plaster. Her phone showed one new email. The bank, confirming her account balance, $34.12. Another sound, the softest whisper of paper sliding under her door. Sofia froze. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. When she finally forced herself to pick up the envelope, her hands were shaking. Inside was a letter from a debt collection agency. It was dated 3 days ago. The amount owed $8,240. This was from a hospital bill from 2 years ago, when Preston had broken her arm in 3 places and left her bleeding on the kitchen floor of an apartment she'd shared with him in Pasadena. She thought that debt was settled. Apparently, she had been wrong. The letter stamped across the top in red ink read, "Final notice. Payment due within 48 hours or asset seizure and wage garnishment will be pursued." She had no assets. The job that should have been paying her wages was gone. The envelope fell from her fingers and landed on the stained carpet of a 10 by 12-foot room that would be her entire world if she couldn't find a way out of this. At 2 in the morning, she walked to Cedars-Sinai. The streets were empty and frozen, frost coating the sidewalk like diamonds under the streetlights. Her breath misted. Her thin jacket, never meant for December in Los Angeles, offered almost no protection. She passed closed shops with dark windows, sleeping homeless people huddled under cardboard and blankets, a police car that slowed as it approached and then accelerated without stopping. She had called the number on Nico's card at 1 in the morning. A voice answered on the first ring, as if someone had been waiting. "It's Sofia." "Ava's," she couldn't finish. "I know who you are." "Where are you?" She told him. There was a pause. Then, "Stay where you are. Don't move." A black SUV appeared within 4 minutes, which was impossible given that she was 3 miles from the hospital, but she was learning that impossible was simply what people with money and power called their Tuesday morning routine. Rocco drove. Enzo sat in the front passenger seat. Neither of them spoke to her, but she felt their curiosity like weight in the air. At the hospital, Rocco escorted her to the surgery waiting room on the 4th floor. The lights were harsh and fluorescent. The furniture was the kind of uncomfortable that was clearly designed to prevent people from staying too long. A coffee machine hummed in the corner, dispensing something that barely qualified as coffee. Nico was already there, waiting. He was holding 2 expensive cups, the good kind from the cafe across the street, the kind that cost $8 each. He handed one to her without a word and sat down 3 chairs away. Close enough that she knew he was there. Far enough that he wasn't crowding her. Hours passed like that, in silence broken only by the occasional page over the intercom, the distant sound of a woman crying somewhere in the hospital, the rhythmic beeping of machines that never stopped. At 6 in the morning, Sofia finally asked the question that had been tearing at her all night. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You barely know Ava. Why would you? Nico stared at his hands. His fingers were long, strong, scarred in ways that suggested a violent history. When he spoke, his voice came so quietly she had to lean forward to hear it. I had a daughter once, he said. A long time ago. She never took a breath. She lived and died before the world ever knew her name. He paused. The weight of that pause was enormous. The nursery is still set up. Upstairs in my house. The crib I bought. The mobile. The clothes we picked out together. I've never been able to dismantle it. Never been able to say her name out loud without something in my chest breaking. He turned to look at Sofia, and she saw it then, the crack in the fortress, the wound that had never healed. But watching you with Ava, he continued. The way you refused to leave even when everyone else walked away. Even when you had nothing. Especially when you had nothing. Some people are worth protecting. You're one of them. Sofia's eyes filled with tears. What was her name? Your daughter? Nico stood abruptly. I should check on the surgery. He left before she could see his face crack completely. At 11 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Patel emerged from the operating room. Sofia stood immediately, her entire body rigid with terror. The surgery was successful, the doctor said, and Sofia heard nothing after that except those 5 words repeating like a prayer finally answered. The valve was in place. The sutures were clean. Ava's heart was still beating, and now it would keep beating. She collapsed into the nearest chair and finally allowed herself to cry. The rain hammered against the motel window like fists demanding entry. Sofia Vasquez sat on the bathroom floor in complete darkness, her back pressed against the cold tile wall, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the letter. The envelope was stamped in red letters that seemed to scream at her, final notice. $11 remained in her wallet. 11. Outside, the Los Angeles night roared with traffic and sirens and the sound of a city that would never know her name. Inside this 6x8 bathroom, there was only the rain and the darkness and the weight of a decision she had been running from for weeks. The bottle of sleeping pills sat on the sink above her head. The hospital had given them to her 3 months ago when insomnia had stolen her few hours of rest. She had forgotten about them until this moment, until the math had become impossible. No apartment. No job. No references because Catherine Mercer had systematically poisoned every nanny agency in Los Angeles with a single phone call. Sofia Vasquez is unstable, unreliable, unsuitable for childcare. The lies had spread like poison through water. Preston's face appeared in her memory, his breath hot and alcohol-soaked, his hand closing around her throat against the brick wall outside Cedars-Sinai Hospital. She was strong. She had survived worse than this. But sitting in the dark with $11 and a daughter who needed her and a stalker who would not stop, something inside Sofia was dissolving. The edges of herself were coming loose. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. She reached for it in the darkness, her fingers fumbling. The screen lit her face in pale blue. A text from the hospital, Ava asking for you. She won't sleep without you. That small thing, that fragile lifeline, pulled her back from the edge like a rope thrown into darkness. Sofia stood on legs that trembled, splashed cold water on her face, and walked back into the rain. But what none of them understood was that Nico Conti had already set everything in motion weeks ago. While Sofia was walking through the rain toward the hospital, while she was climbing the stairs to Ava's fourth-floor room, while she was wiping her own tears before the child could see them, federal agents across Los Angeles were preparing for dawn. 5:47 in the morning. The darkness before first light is the deepest darkness that exists, the time when hope feels like a luxury no one can afford. 12 federal agents in tactical gear stood outside a penthouse on Wilshire Boulevard. Nico Conti had made one phone call to his contact at the FBI. Just one. He had provided everything they needed: financial records showing Preston Mercer's bribes to lapped officers, surveillance footage of the stalking, medical documentation of the assault, communication logs showing his coordination with Catherine to destroy Sofia's reputation systematically. The battering ram hit the door. The sound was like thunder inside a cave. Glass shattered. Flashbangs detonated in brilliant white bursts. Preston Mercer, standing naked in his bedroom with his current girlfriend, had 3 seconds to understand that his world was ending before Hand seized him and forced him to the ground. "You can't do this!" Preston screamed, his voice cracking like he was a child. "I have rights. I know people." The lead FBI agent, a woman named Torres with silver streaking her black hair, leaned down close to his face. Her voice was steady as a blade. "You knew the wrong people, Mr. Mercer. Federal racketeering. Witness tampering. Bribery of law enforcement. Stalking. Assault. You're going to need a miracle, not a lawyer." Handcuffs clicked. Steel on skin. Preston's face went the color of ash as agents lifted him to his feet. His expensive penthouse, decorated in shades of glass and steel and chrome, the kind of space that cost more than Sofia earned in 5 years, suddenly felt like a cage. He had built his life on the belief that money could silence anyone, that connections could erase consequences, that a young woman with $11 in her pocket could be erased so completely that no one would ever ask what happened to her. He was wrong. Simultaneously, in a different part of the city, in a mansion in Hancock Park that had been featured in architectural magazines, FBI agents were executing another warrant. Catherine Mercer was hosting her monthly charity brunch, 30 women in designer clothes seated around a mahogany table, discussing the hospital's new pediatric wing. Catherine was in the middle of describing her recent trip to Monaco when federal agents with badges showing entered through the garden doors. Catherine Mercer. Agent Torres's partner, a man named Richardson with the build of someone who had lifted weights for decades, approached the table. His voice carried the weight of bureaucracy and finality. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement of hospital charitable funds, and conspiracy to commit assault." Catherine's face transformed. The composure cracked like a dropped mirror. "Do you know who I am? My family built this city. My grandmother sat on the hospital board for 40 years. Your family's going to visit you in federal prison," Richardson said, and he placed handcuffs on wrists that had never known hardship, never known the texture of poverty, never been forced to count pennies and choose between food and medicine. Both were perp-walked to separate black vans. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures, their cameras feeding live footage to every television station in Los Angeles. By the time the sun rose, every channel was broadcasting the same image: Preston Mercer, his $1,000 suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his face blank with shock as he was led past the cameras. Catherine beside him, her designer dress torn at the shoulder where she had struggled, her voice hoarse from screaming. Sofia watched it happen on a television mounted in Ava's hospital room. She was sitting in the plastic chair beside the child's bed, her hand resting gently on the girl's small shoulder, when the news anchor broke into the scheduled programming. The footage was live. The arrest was happening in real time across the city. "We're receiving reports of major federal indictments this morning related to witness tampering and organized crime connections," the anchor said. Preston Mercer, a local business owner, has been arrested along with his wife Catherine Mercer on multiple federal charges. Authorities have indicated this case connects to broader investigations into police corruption in the Los Angeles area. Sofia's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes widened. She watched Preston's face as he was pushed into the van, watched Catherine screaming that she had done nothing wrong, watched the realization dawn on them both that money and connections could not purchase their way out of this. Ava stirred in the hospital bed. The 7-year-old's eyes fluttered open. The surgical bandage across her chest was clean and white, a reminder that she had survived something that should have killed her. Sofia. Ava's voice was small, still weak from anesthesia. I'm here, M.I. Corazon. Sofia leaned close, pushing her own shock down deep where it would remain for hours, for days, until she had time to process what was happening. Does this mean the bad man won't come back? Sofia's vision blurred with tears. She took the child's small hand in hers and squeezed it gently, careful not to disturb the fall line. Never, Sofia said. Never again. The news reported 40-year federal sentences each. No parole. Total financial ruin. Preston's assets were frozen, his businesses seized, his reputation demolished across every platform and network and social media channel where his name was mentioned. By noon, 500,000 people had viewed the arrest footage. By evening, 2 million. Every news outlet in the country was running the story. But Sofia did not think about Preston or Catherine. She thought about Ava, whose small hand had squeezed hers. She thought about the doctor's words, the valve is in place, the sutures are clean, her heart will keep beating. She thought about that night 3 weeks ago when she had sat on a bathroom floor in the dark. Nico Conti stood in his office, mahogany panels, a desk that cost more than Sofia's entire annual salary, windows overlooking downtown Los Angeles like he owned the city. He watched the news coverage on a laptop. He watched Preston being led away. He watched Catherine's humiliation broadcast to millions of strangers. Rocco entered without knocking, something only the oldest lieutenants were permitted to do. He was a man in his 60s, scarred in ways that suggested a violent history spanning decades. He stared at the screen for a moment, then turned to Nico. The FBI found nothing, Rocco said. All records were legitimate. All operations dissolved 6 months ago. All taxes paid. He paused. They found exactly what you wanted them to find. Nico did not respond. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, on Preston's face as he understood that his empire was crumbling. She doesn't know, Rocco continued. She's still at the hospital. She still doesn't understand that this was you. Good, Nico said quietly. His voice was like gravel, like something that had been ground down by time. When she figures it out, it should be because she's ready to hear it. Not because I told her it was coming. Rocco withdrew, but not before he exchanged a glance with Enzo, a look that said, in 30 years, I have never seen him like this. In 30 years, I did not know this was possible. The rain continued through the afternoon. Sofia remained in the hospital room as Ava slept, as nurses came to check vital signs and monitor the healing, as the world outside continued its rotation. The television played softly in the corner. They were still covering the arrests. They would cover them for days. Somewhere in the city, in an underground poker room beneath Spring Street that no longer existed, Nico Conti had deleted his past. The empire would transform. The businesses would legitimize. The man who had lived for 15 years in darkness was beginning a process of stepping into light. But that story, that transformation, was not Sofia's yet. For now, she needed only to hold a child's hand and listen to her breathe. She needed to exist in this moment where the threat was gone, where the future had become survivable again. She did not know that in exactly 3 weeks, a man in an expensive suit would appear at the hospital with an offer. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. She did not know that sometimes one hand reached out at exactly the right moment could change an entire life. For now, she simply sat in the darkness and listened to Ava sleep, and that small, ordinary thing felt like everything. The November rain fell against the hospital windows like 1,000 tiny fingers tapping for entry. Sofia Vasquez sat in the yellow chair beside Ava's bed, her hand never leaving the child's small wrist, not because the monitors demanded it but because she couldn't bear to stop touching, proof that the girl was still breathing, still here, still alive. 3 months had passed since that frozen playground, since those 2 miles of carrying an unconscious 7-year-old through streets that had felt like they stretched into infinity. 3 months since the surgeons had opened Ava's chest and replaced a valve that had been failing since birth, since the machines had beeped their steady confirmation that she would survive. The television in the corner played softly. News anchors in tailored suits were still discussing the arrests. Preston Mercer and his wife Catherine, led away in handcuffs at dawn, federal agents surrounding them like wolves closing on prey. 40-year sentences. The medical board chairman's carefully constructed life, dismantled in 6 hours. The society woman who had orchestrated Sofia's eviction now photographed in an orange jumpsuit, her manicured hands trembling as cameras flashed. Justice had come, but it had come from a place Sofia still didn't fully understand. She didn't know that Nico Conti had erased himself from the equation entirely. The underground poker room beneath Spring Street no longer existed. The servers that had logged every transaction, every conversation, every debt owed had been wiped clean by people who knew how to erase digital footprints like they were sweeping dirt from a floor. The empire, the real empire, the one that had generated $40 million annually through gambling, loan sharking, and protection rackets, had begun its transformation into something legitimate. Real estate development. Charitable foundations. Businesses that paid taxes and appeared in the newspaper under headlines about community investment rather than federal indictment. Nico himself had stepped back into the shadows, a man withdrawing from his own life with the same precision he'd used to build it. Rocco had visited Sofia once, exactly once, 3 weeks after the raid. He'd brought an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on cream-colored paper, the handwriting controlled and careful. You stood alone when you should have had an army. You never will again. But you owe me nothing. What was done was right, not payment. No signature. Sofia had read it 17 times, trying to decode the message beneath the words. She understood now. Nico Conti had orchestrated everything, the surgery, the raid, the systematic destruction of 2 people who had tried to grind her beneath their heels. And he'd asked for nothing. No debt. No obligation. No strings wrapped around her throat. The hospital had released Ava on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Child Services had completed their investigation and found Sofia fit for emergency legal guardianship, a status that would become permanent in 6 months unless challenged. The medical bills, all $47,000, plus $8,000 in subsequent care, had been marked paid in full by an anonymous donor. A hospital administrator had handed Sofia the paperwork with an expression that suggested she understood exactly who the donor was and that certain questions were best left unasked. 3 days after Ava came home, Rocco appeared at Sofia's motel room door with a job offer. Conti Holdings, a legitimate real estate development firm with offices in downtown Los Angeles, was seeking a child welfare coordinator. $65,000 annually. Health insurance. Paid leave. Her own apartment in a safe building with a doorman. The interview, Rocco explained, was merely a formality. The position was hers if she wanted it. Sofia had wanted to refuse. Pride had straightened her spine, had made her want to tell Rocco that she didn't need charity, that she could rebuild on her own, that accepting anything more would make her a puppet dancing on Nico Conti's strings. But Ava had been sleeping in the corner of the motel room, her small body curled under a blanket worn thin from washing, and Sofia had understood that refusing Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She had accepted. The apartment was on the 15th floor of a building called The Gardens, a name that made Sofia smile because there were actual gardens, rooftop terraces with flowering vines and stone benches and a view of the city that seemed to stretch into infinity. The unit itself was small, just 2 bedrooms and a kitchen with granite counters, but every room had actual windows that let in real sunlight, not the dim grey seepage that had been her entire life. She'd painted Ava's room yellow and covered one wall with stick-on stars, a small rebellion of beauty in a life that had known so little of it. Sofia had been unpacking boxes. Her possessions were so few that they fit into 4 cardboard containers when Rocco arrived with the final envelope. He'd handed it to her without speaking, nodded, and left. Inside was another note from Nico, the nursery upstairs in my house. I finally said her name out loud yesterday. Elena. Elena Rose. It felt like breaking a dam that should have stayed sealed forever. I'm going to see someone about that. Someone who helps people carry what they shouldn't have to carry alone. What you did for Ava, carrying her through the dark when you had nothing to carry her with, that's what it's supposed to look like. That's what I couldn't do for my daughter. You showed me what I missed. Again, no signature. Sofia had folded that note and placed it in a small wooden box where she kept the few things that mattered: her mother's rosary, the photograph of her father before the accident, a drawing Ava had made, purple scribbles that the girl had explained was colors for happy days. Work at Conti Holdings began on a Monday. The offices occupied 3 floors of a glass building downtown, all floor-to-ceiling windows and polished concrete, and the organized efficiency of a legitimate business. Sofia's desk overlooked the city. Her job was to manage community programs, scholarship funds, after-school programs, interventions for at-risk children. Real work. Meaningful work. The kind of work she'd never imagined she'd be qualified to do. One Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after she'd started, Nico had invited Ava to take your child to work day. Sofia had been nervous about it, unsure how the girl would behave in the formal office environment, but Ava had simply run through the hallways like a small, healed bird discovering flight for the first time, and the employees had smiled and given her high fives and offered her candy from desk drawers. Sofia had watched from her cubicle as Ava reached Nico's office door. The Mafia boss, though no one called him that anymore, he was simply Mr. Conti now, the man who owned the building and signed the paychecks, had been standing at his floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city. When Ava appeared, his entire body had gone still. Not hostile still. Vulnerable still. Enzo, who worked as some kind of operational director, had leaned toward Sofia and spoken quietly. I've never seen him look at anyone like that. Sofia had followed his gaze and caught Nico's expression for just a moment, longing, grief, something like peace all braided together in the space between one breath and the next. His eyes had met Sofia's across the office floor. A nod. Nothing more. Not yet. What Sofia didn't know was that Nico had started attending therapy sessions on Thursday afternoons, that he'd finally agreed to dismantle the nursery upstairs, that he'd boxed up the crib and the tiny clothes and the things he'd kept frozen in time for 16 years. She didn't know that he'd visited Elena's grave for the first time since the burial, that he'd said her name, Elena, out loud to the wind and the stone and the part of himself that had been dead for so long. 6 months later, in early autumn, Sofia stood on a rooftop garden above downtown Los Angeles. The sun was descending toward the horizon, turning the sky into shades of amber and rose. Ava was with a babysitter, a trusted woman from the community programs, someone Sofia knew would keep the girl safe. Sofia stood alone, waiting, though she didn't know for what. Then Nico Conti appeared through the garden door. He was dressed simply, dark pants, a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His hair was longer than she'd ever seen it, silvered at the temples, and he looked older and younger simultaneously, like a man who'd finally begun to carry his weight differently. He walked to the railing beside her and stood without speaking for a long moment. Her name was Elena, he said finally. His voice was like gravel, like something that had been ground down by time. Elena Rose Conti. She was stillborn 16 years ago. I couldn't say it after the funeral. Couldn't dismantle the nursery. Built an empire instead to fill the silence, but it never worked. Sofia felt her chest tighten. She knew, somehow, that this was important. That this was him offering her something he'd offered no one else. Then I saw you on security footage, he continued. Refusing to abandon a child who wasn't even yours, and I remembered what it felt like to care about something more than power. More than safety. More than control. His voice broke. It actually broke, a crack in the stone of him, and Sofia understood that Rocco and Enzo had been right. In however many years they'd worked for him, they'd never seen this. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were rough from years of labor, calloused from holding other people's children, and his hand was warm and solid and real. "You didn't save me for her memory," Sofia said quietly. "You saved me because it was right." "Maybe," Nico replied. "But you saved yourself, Sofia. You carried Ava 2 miles. You stood alone in that courtroom. You survived. I just made sure you didn't have to fight alone anymore." Sofia squeezed his hand. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." Nico turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw something she recognized because she felt it too, the slow, tentative opening of a heart that had learned to protect itself. Not a declaration. Not a kiss. Just 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage, standing together as equals, the beginning of something real. The city lights were coming on below them, tiny constellations of human existence spreading across the darkness. Somewhere down there, Preston and Catherine Mercer sat in federal prison, their names attached to a story they'd never thought would catch up with them. Somewhere down there, Ava was sleeping in her yellow room under her stick-on stars. Somewhere in the future, there would be more moments like this, more chances to rebuild, more opportunities to choose love over fear. Sofia looked at this man, powerful, flawed, human, and understood something she'd been learning all along. Sometimes one hand reached out at exactly the right moment can change an entire life. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.